Good morning, and thank you for joining us. My name is Craig Cornelius. I'm a member of the International Engineering Group, and I'm pleased to introduce you to several members of the Cherokee Nation. About almost 2 years ago, I had a chance meeting with a member of the Cherokee Nation, taking him to a camp, and I mentioned that I was at Google. He mentioned that, oh, we have people in our company who'd like to make connections with Google because we've been doing a lot with trying to preserve our language, and we'd love to have Google help us work on Google's tools for the Cherokee Nation and the Cherokee language. That led to a collaboration over the last year and a half. We have, as of March of this year, a version of Google Web Search in the Cherokee language, and I think you'll learn an awful lot about the way the Cherokee Nation has used technology. We have 3 visitors today, Joseph Erb, Ray Boney, and Jeff Edwards, and they will tell you a lot about how the Cherokee Nation is using technology to keep their culture alive and vibrant for centuries to come.
Wadon. Sio Nagad, Sio Ani Google, people of Google, hello. Oh, you can't hear me? Okay, I'll squeeze closer. Maybe my volume. Yeah. Wadon. Is that better? Yeah. Sio. Joseph Erb, Awadon. Joseph is what they call me, I guess you say it. We're from the Cherokee Nation. We are a new department, even though we'll talk a little bit, quick, brief summary of the history and then what we've done with technology in the last few years. And I think it'll be interesting because it'll show you a different side of a take of technology and a culture in communities that went from having different stages of technology. So you'll see that Cherokee people have actually embraced technology for hundreds of years. And so we'll start with that with some of our slides here, and then we'll get into some of the advancements we've made with Google and how it's important for us to actually continue as a people to address these technology needs because of what occurs with language loss and cultural loss if you don't localize, like your communities in your language. So, Julie?
Well, my name is Roy, and Joseph said we're a new department, and we're the language technology program at Cherokee Nation. And what we do basically is we find technology solutions for our language. And we have a unique written language, which we'll talk about here. This first slide is an image of the historical boundaries of the Cherokee Nation. You can see it's got the outline, the blue, the red, and the green. That shows how it shrunk over the years as westward expansion occurred, in United States history. So that's a map showing that. So what happened is, the Cherokees, we were in the first groups that actually made a lot of, we made treaties with England and all this. We were one of the earliest documented tribal nations in the United States because we had this back and forth relationship. This image here is an image of, they call it the 3 Kings. These were 3 Cherokee ambassadors that were sent to England to negotiate some terms with the king at the time. But we show this to show the Cherokee Nation has been around quite some time, even before the United States itself. And we've always been, educated people, and we always try to keep ahead of, what's going on. And this is Sequoyah. Sequoyah is significant in Cherokee history because he's the one that created the written language of the Cherokees. We've had the spoken language, but we did not have the written form, so he created a syllabary, and a sample of that is right below the title there. That's Sequoyah in Cherokee. So Sequoyah came up with the handwriting system of the Cherokee syllabary in the he'd been working on it like at the mid-18 teens, but he had several problems. At the time, people weren't accepting of it. They thought, it was a lofty pursuit, and maybe it wouldn't happen or shouldn't happen for various reasons. But around 1820, he had finally finalized an idea of what it would be, and he simplified he didn't simplify it, but he broke down the entire language into 85 characters. So this image here shows the original handwritten syllabary by Sequoyah. And you can see there's two versions here. If you see the first part, one looks like a cursive writing, and next to it you see like this first one looks like a little R next to it, kind of. That's showing how it went from a cursive to the typeface, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But this chart shows a comparison of the two. This was adopted by the Cherokee Nation Council in 1821. So what happened is during this time of history, we had we call it the removal era, in which the United States adopted the policy of removing the Indians from the east and moving toward the west. So what was going on is the Cherokee Nation needed to combat this idea somehow. So the writing system was part of that. And so we adopted the handwritten version that Sequoyah did. As you can see here, there's the cursive. They simplified to the metal typeface. So we established a printing press in the 1820s. There's an image of one of the presses. That's actually in Tahlequah, Oklahoma now. That's where the Cherokee Nation is based now. You can come to the museum and see the printing press there. There's some images of the metal type. So if you deal with a lot of type, you know how tiny those things are. Below it is an image of the typeface taken from the original press itself. You can see it was greatly modified from the handwritten to this, as is the nature of that adaptation. And so this is the typeface that we wound up with. We've had the same typeface since the 1820s until recently, when this is the base model, but we're just now getting to the point where we can do sans serif typefaces and that type of thing with the Cherokee language. This image here is actually the first instance of Cherokee in print. You can see it right there's the first few verses of the book of Genesis from the Bible. This was printed in 1827, and so a couple of months later, here's a close-up of it. The printing press was established with a relationship between the Cherokee Nation and the American Board of Foreign Missionaries, and what they were, the goal was to, be missionaries to the Cherokee Nation. But in part of that process, they helped develop the printing press. And the Cherokee Nation contracted with a foundry in Boston called the Grill Foundry that actually made the typeface letters themselves. But this is the first time that it was ever printed. It was in a newsletter to their supporters in the 1800s, or 1827. And this here is the result of all that. The Cherokee Nation wanted to print a newspaper. So this is the Cherokee Phoenix, and that was the first issue was printed in 1828. This isn't the first issue, but they all look like this pretty much. It's printed in English and in Cherokee. And at the time, this was it was the first Native American language newspaper ever printed, and it's still printed today. But it was used to as kind of like like I said, a PR piece to inform everyone, including Cherokees and everyone else in the United States, of what was happening, what their removal policy. Washington wanted to remove the Cherokees and other tribes from their homelands. So the interesting thing about it is that not only did it circulate here in the continental U.S., it also made its way to Europe at the time, and that created a very an awareness of our language in Europe. So our language itself, the written version, has been studied ever since. People have always had a fascination with it. It's a rare accomplishment for a single person to come with a writing system. So Sequoyah has become sort of a big hero, mythological figure almost. But we'll get back to this point a bit later of why that's important to us. But I'll let Joseph take over for a bit.
So this is what's exciting is that even though we weren't successful in keeping our land, and we were shoved out by the United States, but we won in the Supreme Court. People don't realize that the United States Supreme Court said we didn't have to move, but Andrew Jackson did. So we ended up getting moved, and this is a shot. We produced a film a few years back, and this is a little screenshot of it in front of a map, and it shows you where we ended up today. After the removal, it's one of the first things is we did the printing press, and what was neat is that we rebuilt our society. And one of the things we started with is education. And in education, we educated men and women, which was unusual at the time because if, you know, we think of equal rights and can you imagine in the 1800s, Cherokees paid women the same as men. We educated all the women and men from 6 years old to 21. We had 61 schools and 2 universities. And this is one of the most leading cutting edges, education systems in the world because we educated the entire population for free. So we had printing presses back then. We made books, materials, some religious, some academic. All this occurred, and technology still advanced. Cherokees were the first to have a telephone west of the Mississippi. So we were actually, technologically, we're more advanced, and you think, well, what would make people still advance like this, even though we were 80 to 90% literate compared to the 13% of whites at the time? Why would you want to care about this new technology that came out? Why were we an early adopter? So people came in, salesmen, like they do at the Steels of the Day at Cherokee Nation, and they got these 2 guys that would test the technology. They ran a cord, and these guys had a conversation. And they tried to discuss, well, are they going to get it? The reason they did is that this one statement is if they wanted to get it, would they? This is the reason they got it. Talks in Cherokee. If you can use the technology in your language, it's your technology. It's not a white technology. It's not a German technology or Korean technology. It's your technology when your language is utilized in it. So we had the first telephones. And this guy, I don't know if you guys know who Will Rogers is, but he was a mixed blood Cherokee. And his technology was the radio. And he was a satirist, which if you know anything about Cherokee, we like to laugh a lot. And he made a lot of jokes and teased about political stuff. He was like a lot of comedians today joking about politics and all. And he brought a lot of awareness of Cherokee people back then. And so he also used technology for us. And that was really early on. He bought radios for Cherokee schools and stuff so that they'd be aware. Again, adopting the latest technology before other people.
Well, as you can see here, this is a typewriter, and it just kind of shows that, throughout history, the Cherokees have continued to keep up with technology. I believe this one's around 1970? Yeah, that was a little earlier than that. And so just throughout history, they've continued to keep on top of technology, and that's a really neat piece to see there. And that's just a document that was typed up on the typewriter, I guess, in March of 1917. Here's a few. Oh, and then this is just kind of more of the paper going over to Europe, and it kind of preserved our language by it going over there because it kept it documented and kept it alive. So.
Like I mentioned earlier, we bring this up because the paper making its way to Europe created an awareness of our language, internationally, and that's held through ever since. And this slide here is taken from the typographer Herman Zopf. If you deal with a lot of fonts, unless you know who this guy is, but he was working on a Cherokee font back in the 70s. Unfortunately, this font never quite made it out, but this is an example of how people have always been interested in the Cherokee language, and it helped us out a lot. What happened is this here is one of the first Cherokee fonts designed by actual Cherokee speakers. And this is from around 1991, 92. Again, you can see it's based on that old typeface. It's slightly modified, but it's got the basic elements of it there. And this particular slide is showing this is by Joan Tuzet, I suppose. She was a student at Yale, and she got a grant to make a Cherokee typeface of fonts. And this is what she came up with. And this model is based on that earlier chart we showed you. And the Cherokee Nation uses as a model for the font that we had for around 2000. The Cherokee Nation came out with this own font, and this is what it looked like. And you know, it was good in the sense that we had a Cherokee font that at least we could type up documents, and it was like a fancy typewriter at the time. We just could type it and print it. That's all we could do. It was not Unicode compliant because it was mapped to English characters on the keyboard. So it looks Cherokee, but technically it's not. And that, you know, if we wanted to use technology other than just, you know, printing stuff out, we were still just kind of stuck in the era until we came up with Unicode. But this is an image of the Cherokee Nation headquarters in Tahlequah. We don't actually work in that building. We're housed elsewhere, but that's where we used to be. But yeah, well, you want to switch? Okay.
In 2003, the Cherokee Nation did a language survey of our language, and they found that less than 10% of people under the age of 40 were fluent. So we kind of went back in history again where we educated everyone, and we started a school. Jalagi Junadelo Kwasti is the name. That's a Cherokee school. And we currently have around 90 students, 3- and 4-year-old, all the way up to 6th grade. And our students all have one-to-one Mac laptops, and our language is supported on Mac. And unfortunately, with having a Cherokee school, you can't just go to the store and buy Cherokee material, so everything has to be made in-house. So we really had to get busy pretty quick. We wanted our students at the school to basically have everything that an English school would have. So we just started getting with our translators and creating this stuff. And so we're trying to give them everything that you would have at an English school, except in Cherokee. This is an older, about a 6th grade document there. That's the digestive system, and it's kind of gross looking, but they need to learn it, I guess. And so we have a lot of fun making this stuff because, you know, it's never been made before. And of course, we have the solar system and didn't know where the planets are at. And of course, there's the United States. Again, all this stuff we just have to make, and when we adopted Unicode, it made it a lot easier to make this stuff because someone could work on it, and then we could send it to someone else, and they could work on it. And before, it didn't really work that way. So, and this is just one of our students before we had computers at the school. You know, they've got the old pencil and paper, and it's taken a really long time. And now that they have their computers, it's a lot better process. So. And what we're going to show you here is a little animation that we made. We're competing with SpongeBob and Dora the Explorer and all these stuff in English, and so we have to try to figure out ways to, keep the kids engaged and keep them in the language, because once the kids leave our school, not very many of the parents are fluent, and so once they leave school, they go back into an English world, and so what we're trying to do is create stuff for them outside of school to keep them, you know, in Cherokee thought. So this is a little animation we made for them. Won't blow your ears out too bad on that. And this is the Cherokee Nation non-Unicode font. This has been around, I'm not really for sure how long, I guess the 90s? Yeah, 99, 2000. And this was our first font that we actually had where we were able to type. It served a purpose because, you know, our language, we could use it on a computer, but like Roy said before, it was more or less type it up and print it out. You couldn't really do anything else with it. And as you can see there, I don't know if you can see it really well, there's all the code points for the Unicode. Or English, I'm sorry, for the English on there. I don't know if you can see that real well. And then that's our layout, our keyboard layout, and we'll show you a little bit later one that we created, but that's basically how to get Cherokee if you have the old non-Unicode font installed. If you do the lowercase and the uppercase and hit that key, then you're going to get that particular character. So learning Cherokee before Unicode was pretty difficult because you had to remember where 85 characters were and which, you know, when you had to hit shift and when you had to hit a 9 to get that character. So it was pretty complicated. If you worked with it a really long time, then, you know, obviously you would memorize it. But typing was pretty painful during this time.
we keep talking about Unicode just because of the importance of what it did for our language. All the material that Jeff showed at first was created with that old font that wasn't Unicode. So I said again, we were stuck with just making something, printing it out, and having a poster or paper, and we wanted to move beyond that. And the reason that we introduced the Macs in the schools was that on the OS 10, I think 10.3, they started supporting a Cherokee Unicode font and keyboard on the system. So that keyboard layout that was just up, that was put into the Apple OS, the shift keys, but there was also another keyboard layout that did the phonetic typing. So if you knew how to spell, basically say it, you could type it out and it would switch to syllable for you, just like kind of how Japanese does and that type of thing. But we had it in Cherokee. And like I said, the reason it happened is because of Unicode. Cherokee was adopted, or the glyphs were assigned code points, I guess around 1995. The Cherokee Nation made an application to the group, and it went through the whole process on this, but we eventually got pulled into the system, and because of that, we can move on to this. So this shot here is our image is a screenshot of one of the fonts. Well, this is Plantagenet Cherokee, but you can see this is the Unicode point range for Cherokee. It starts with it looks like the D character up in that first row, but that's the A in Cherokee, but that's where it starts and goes all the way down to the B, which is the Y. Well, it looks like a B, but it's not. So Cherokee does have its own unique code point range in the Unicode tables. So what happened is, I said in 2003, Apple started supporting it, but it took a while to trickle down to the communities because we had that one font for the longest time. And everyone that used it, a lot of our people that use it are older and they don't quite understand the technical ideas of what this means. So we said, don't use that font anymore, use a Unicode font. And most people are like, what does that even mean? That kind of, they glaze over. But this group here, at the Indigenous Language Institute, there's a man named Chris Harvey that works for them. And Chris developed one of the first keyboard layouts for the Cherokee language that followed that phonetic typing system. And there's his website, it's languagegeek.com. He's got a lot of fonts for other native languages as well. They're all Unicode, and if you're interested in that, you can go to his website and download his stuff. He makes keyboards as well. So we've used his materials quite a lot ever since he's been doing this. But like I said, Apple supported the language on the desktops, or the computer OS here. So you can see these are some of our students at the school using their laptops. They can do everything in the language. They do all their homework in Cherokee now. They have blogs and wikis and emails and everything else that you can do in English, they can do in Cherokee now. It's because the school itself is, everything is taught in Cherokee, from the history, I guess they showed all the maps and all this, everything is in the language. So they needed a way to use the language in Cherokee in the modern context, because the kids started off at pre-K, and every year we keep adding a grade to the school. We're currently up to the 6th grade, but when we started doing this, they were in the 2nd or 3rd, I think in 3rd grade, and they needed technology in the room. They were getting older, and to keep up with what the kids need today, they got to have this. So that's why we introduced this to them at that time. So there they are doing their more homework there. And I always like this picture because it shows, this is a little girl, obviously using the technology, and she really likes it, and she enjoys having her computer. And if there's a problem with it, we're the first ones to know. She'll tell us, hey, there's something wrong with this thing. But I guess one of the teachers working with the students. Some more shots there. So they really like this stuff. So it hit them where they live, basically. Before this, a computer to them was just another machine they could do stuff on, but it wasn't really Cherokee friendly, because using a font that's not Unicode, has lots of problems. If you try to email something, it's going to get all gobbledygook. It's not going to quite work right. You couldn't use it in a website unless you made an image out of. They have all these problems. If you try to embed the font, it's just not very optimal until we start using Unicode. But the great thing about all this is, we have the Cherokee Immersion School in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. But there's also, we talked about how the Cherokees were moved from the east to Oklahoma. There were some Cherokees that stayed in the east. So in Cherokee, North Carolina, there's the Eastern Band of Cherokees. That's a separate tribal group. We're all kind of related, but that's a technically different government system now versus ours. But they have a Cherokee language immersion school as well. So this slide here is a little video we're going to play. We have video chats between the two schools now. So the kids, at our school, they're the ones in the little corner there, get really excited because they get to see there's other children out there too learning this language, because Cherokee, like many indigenous languages, is in danger of dying out. So this is all in an effort to, perpetuate the language. And so this clip is just between the two schools. They're interacting, and we'll play a little part of it. We're teaching each other songs. But you get the idea. They enjoy using this stuff, and we had to move to this, which we had to hit them even harder where they live. We'll let Joseph take over that.
So last year, it's just about a year now, we are officially on the iPhone. And so you can imagine the technology advantage that we had, because these kids were actually getting to the point where they were going to start texting and doing all the stuff normal kids do. But they would give up Cherokee to text their friends, of course, because you're going to text your friends, your cousins, all that. Our kids didn't have to give up their language skill. They could still text each other in Cherokee, and they were so excited. They were beaming to have this day occur. And it gave us the ability for contacts and folders and all this stuff. And recently we were able to do some we got in the CLDR. It's really weird. It's great to talk to you guys, because a lot of times when we talk about Unicode and stuff back home, people just want to see the surface area. And we have to go to these kind of, it's probably like when you go home and talk to your family at the holidays and you're like trying to get the glaze over Unicode or programming, what? So we were so excited to come and talk to you guys, because these are text. We have elders texting us. We didn't realize that actually elders would pick up devices in an Indian community and start texting us. So we'll have people in their 70s, you're like, God, and they're texting you and you're busy, you could work pretty hard, and all of a sudden you're getting a text from a 70-year-old person that you have to respond to. They're an elder speaker, and in our culture you have to respond. So you can see us, actually this is when we were translating the Google search engine, and these guys were texting other speakers to see if the translations for these new terminologies, if the other groups liked them. So they were using their iPhones to actually because we were translating the search engine, and we were sitting around in front of this, in my office here, texting other speakers too, and there was a big discussion in Cherokee about this word and the meaning of this and concepts. And we made digital books in the language, so we still are printing in a way for our digital devices. And this is Andy Payne. He ran from LA to New York. It was a transcontinental race. And Andy Payne, he was a Cherokee guy. He won this 83-day race. It was a worldwide race. At the time, it was $25,000, which was a lot of money. And he won the race. And later he became a lawyer or something. But we were proud of that runner. And Andy Payne is taught about a bunch of these traditional stories. Roy did the illustration here. And you can see these kids using the technology isn't something they think about, just like families don't care about code and all the achievements you do. What they really care about is how it works. And they can get on there and chat with their friends, iChat, read books, hear sounds, watch animations. But we made some friends, contacted Facebook, and we started doing Facebook in Cherokee. So if you could imagine, usually when you're from a dominant language group or even a larger group, localization is something that you don't really have to be concerned about to the degree when you're such a small group. Because every day when you're walking out of the building, when you're walking down the street, it reinforces your reading skills because you're seeing stuff in your language all the time. Well, finally we have our written language coming back, our literacy skills coming back, because you can do stuff on Facebook. This is a conversation I posted up here. It was a snow day, and I took off work, and then Durbin Feelings, he's one of our, actually he's a living treasure now. He wrote the 1975 dictionary, asked me how did I know that, and I said, well, I got an email from the chief. And he's like, oh, Hawa, and we ended up having a conversation. But this stuff's possible because the technology is starting to be there, because of the localization. Some other people in our community, this is Wade, he's a friend of ours. Wikipedia, you know, we're starting to get more and more articles in Cherokee. We're not a lot yet. But you know, if you think about it, a year and having devices, most of our community have to be online with mobile devices. Internet is sparse. We're from a very poor rural community. And so a lot of people have to get online with their cell phones. And so we think we're growing pretty good at this point. If you could imagine, this is a huge achievement for us. You think about, well, a third grader writing a blog. It happens all the way around the world. But it finally happens in Cherokee. And we were so excited that our language is being used by our children, which hadn't happened. You know, we grew up, we were the first generation. They stopped teaching. You know, there was a lot of traumatic events from boarding schools and horrible things from statehood that occurred to our grandparents and parents that caused them to think that it's not important for us. And then we came back and grew up and thought, it is important. This is something we need to do. And having little girls and little boys write blogs online is a giant achievement for us.
I guess some of you probably recognize this page, you know, the language settings on Google. This came out in March. And working with Craig and the translators at Cherokee Nation, we finally got, you know, Cherokee as one of the interface languages on the Google search engine. So there it is on the list there if you want to go there and switch your language out. There's a shot of the homepage there. And you can see, you know, we have the keyboard too on there, so everything works in Cherokee. And this keyboard layout, it follows that one that we showed earlier, you know, from the old Cherokee Nation font, so that you can hit your shift key and it follows that same pattern there. But I think it's really great that this is out there, especially people back home that can do websites and stuff. You know, they can take the code there and put that into their website too. I think that's a pretty cool thing. But this is just the other day, you know, it shows that we use Google every day. And, you know, we had the Art Clokey birthday celebration the other day. And, you know, we're not computer people. If anyone knows us, we're artists. We have our degrees in art. We just got into technology because of the needs that we were working in the language. But so we used to do stop motion animation with kids, and they would do the stories in the Cherokee language. So when I seen this, I'm like, that's really cool, you know, that. You know, Google decided to celebrate, you know, the birthday of Art Clokey, the creator of Gumby. But, you know, it's in the Cherokee language. You can see all the buttons in Cherokee in the interface, and it shows how far we've come along as a people in a group with our language. Here's a sample of doing an image search, you know, of a cat. You know, you have everything works in Cherokee there, so it's pretty neat. We're really fortunate that this occurred. And in the video search, so there's several videos popping up on YouTube now, you know, in Cherokee, and, you know, they're titled in Cherokee. And again, because of Unicode, this is happening. For us, you know, a lot of people will take it for granted, you know, but we're really happy that we got into the Unicode code point system there. This was just the other day too. This is a Google Maps in Cherokee, and you can you create your own maps there. So, you know, this technology is being used, and it's actively being used. And not only do our kids use it, the idea was to get children to use this technology. What happened was they are using it, but the older generation is using it too, because you know, typically, you know, the older people are kind of stereotyped as, hey, we're not going to use this, or, you know, they're scared of it, but they've latched onto the technology because it happens in the Cherokee language. So if you can get products and devices and things that are actually in Cherokee, our community adopts it really quickly. Even like the iPhone, iPad, and all the iPod Touch and everything, when people seen that it was a part of the OS and it was just on it, you know, a lot of people thought it was an app. They're like, hey, where can I get that Cherokee app? And we have to say, look, no, it's actually on the OS. If you have 4.1 and higher is when it started. So if you have, you know, if you go to the store now and just buy one of these devices, Cherokee's on it, and that people. Yeah, at first it took a while for them to grasp the idea, but when they got it, there was really this huge impact that it had on our language. So this here is a image of I think it's a Droid 2 there. So we're hoping maybe we can get some help on this here from you guys. You know, since it doesn't have a Cherokee font in the system, it shows up as squares there. But as many of you know, you can root your device, which is what I did here. So I rooted a phone here, and I put a Cherokee phone onto it. But it would be great, if we could actually have Cherokee on the device or the OS itself without having to do this process. Because I get a lot of people now around, back in Tahlequah asking me if I can, because a lot of people use Droids, and it's very popular, and it's even surpassing, the iPhone of where we're at, because it's, people really like it. So we'd like to be on both, but I am always doing root requests now. There's a Zoom tablet I had the root. So people really want it, but at this point, that's most people in our community don't have the savvy to do this. It's kind of, it's really technical, especially for someone that just doesn't know anything about how this stuff is. They're like, oh, I don't want to go through this whole process and, root it and do this, but they show it's possible. You want to? Yeah, you can wrap up.
All right, so this is our paper. Our paper is still going today. There's an app for that, actually. You can see that we're still using our language online. We're still going. We're still around. People always want to, are Indians still alive? And we do have a live culture. The reason we do all this stuff is so that we can, we started teaching at the university just so that we could teach the Cherokee degree community, because we're opening up 5 more immersion schools soon, and we need teachers for them, and we're educating the next generation of teachers, and we wanted them technologically savvy so that they can talk about Unicode, they can install keyboards, they'll know how to root, they can actually get the community by, so there isn't a small group of us, there's teams of us in our community. And this is an article, it's in Cherokee, and then if you don't read it, you can click on the English button and see that on Cherokee Phoenix and read it in English as well. But we do it, we do all this technology stuff because we have a culture, a language. We have children that statistics show that if they know their culture and language, they stay out of trouble, they're healthier, they're less prone to diabetes and all the horrible stuff that occur. You need this kind of stuff to keep people happy and healthy people. And these are our children. You can see we're teaching them dances, traditional foods, but we're able to do a lot of this stuff. If all you do is ceremonies in the language, you don't do it all the time, and you eventually won't know what your prayers say. You won't know what your culture is doing. You may remember just a few things. But if you're getting a text every day in Cherokee constantly from all these people, and emails and blogs, and you're reading stuff on Facebook in Cherokee, your language survives, your people survive. And Google's been a part of this process for us. You can Google search. Last year, you typed in Tahlequah in our language. There was a little under 50,000, which is great. We're a small group. Now there's 1.5 million in 1 year, and still limited access and devices that we're still going. So we're growing despite everything. We're like starting to take off with our language digitally. And so this is a renaissance for us. These children are all our youngest speakers. If you can imagine, they speak very good Cherokee. They don't have an accent like us. It's very smooth. And we appreciate you. Wadon. And this is Wadon in Cherokee. Thank you. We have one more, right? It's our contact information. If you guys ever want to contact us, this is kind of the technology was changing so fast. We couldn't, eventually what happened in the last 100 years, someone would come along, they'd work on a typewriter, and things wouldn't change that much. And now technology is changing so fast. Cherokee Nation actually has a division that addresses that, and we are the small but growing division that deals with the localization and all the different needs that our language has and technology issues. And we're excited that Google, it's one of the first things that Google, it connects us, Google does on the internet. And now we're able to connect on the language. So if you can imagine those little kids on their computers, they're not having to see that in English, which is reinforcing everything we're doing to keep this culture that's thousands of years old to this continent alive. And Google's been a part of it. So we appreciate your time. If you have any questions, we're here. Or don't.
So please, if you have questions. Yeah. Okay, let's do the mic so that you can see here. Ooh. My tech.
Grab the first one.
Okay, I was wondering the process for coming up with Cherokee terms for new concepts. Do you develop sort of your own sort of names, or are they sort of partially phonetic with the English terms, or how does that work? You know, how indigenous are the names?
Yeah, how do you localize terms that we've never had before?
Yeah, like Unicode.
Yeah,
I mean,
actually,
you know?
Unicode is it's a Unicode, but
Okay, so that's
almost
sort of transliterated a little bit.
But most stuff we don't do.
Yeah.
But code we did because a lot of times when we're localizing, we look at other languages and see how that did it. And a lot of languages did the idea of a transliteration of code.
Okay.
But like for email, for instance, we call it lightning paper.
Cool.
So it's all of them have different terms, but mainly they're Cherokee concepts with a handful of transliteration. And so Unicode is transliterated, but most of things like email, server, they're all descriptive terms. Cherokee is a verb-based language.
Oh, okay.
So we describe everything, and it's really neat because you can pack a lot of meaning in a very short word.
Yeah.
And we're tonal language, so it's really an interesting thing. Yeah, like download, like you're taking it down because it's so spatial as well. We were discussing this concept, and we were a bunch of elders, and they were discussing, well, you take it down and you put it inside something. And that's all just in a very small word. And so this occurs with stuff from emails to servers to, God, I guess I'm standing up and I'm getting blank because I'm nervous, but there's a lot of terms, and most of them deal with that. Digital stuff usually deals with some type of lightning adjustment. Just like, I guess in English, you do electronic for a lot of things, but for us,
it's lightning.
Lightning. And so, but lightning paper we always think it sounds really cool, and kids remember it, you know?
Yeah, you bet, yeah.
So,
just a quick follow-up. You mentioned that Cherokee is a tonal language. Are there tonal marks in the character set, or is it like something like Arabic or Hebrew where they don't have vowels and you just know?
You kind of have to know.
Okay, so it's not indicated in the
not in the
writing system at all.
No, it's not. We were actually working on a grant with the Science Foundation for the dictionary to actually put tonal marks in for dictionary purposes. But you're right. It has to be known. But we always try to describe it as in English, if you write the word store, like you're going to a store or something. Yeah. You actually write it S-T-O-R-E. You don't say story.
Yeah.
Because we know there's a silent E there. And we have the similar thing. When you look at search, we actually had a problem with search. This is, oddly enough, a really complicated writing problem we had. The word here is aishti, which in Cherokee phonetics, you drop the second syllabary vowel. And so you can actually write it ayoshti, ayashti, ayansti, and they know with the context, what it is. But if you write ayoshti, you have to be careful, because some of the translators really liked that because there were some grammatical reasons why you could write it this way. But it also means to shoot at somebody or to break apart something, and you don't want that when you're searching.
Right.
You don't want to break anything when you're pushing a button. So we ended up actually translating ayasti. We don't have a centralized system of writing comparatively, because just like you can write cool in English, C-O-O-L or K-O-W-L or K-E-L. We have a slight adjustment to some things, but people can pretty much read it. But we've noticed since we're working, the language is starting to grow with Facebook and all this stuff. It seems that our community is starting to centralize spellings.
Oh, okay.
In just a few years, I mean, it's starting to you see people online.
That's what you get with a living language.
Yeah, because we didn't have this kind of growth, and now it's starting to grow together again. But it's a really good question, because these, trouble us a lot, and sometimes you'll get stuck a day or two on a word, and you're sitting there trying to understand concepts, and you're like, what are programmers thinking? Sorry.
Thank you.
So I have both a historical question and a modern question. My historical question, do you have any idea why Sequoyah invented a new syllabary whole cloth rather than using Latin alphabet or doing an abugada like the Canadian Indian languages used. He seemed to have just created, what, 53 symbols, 85 symbols, just created 85 symbols and assigned sounds to them. Just, do you know, was there a reason for this?
Well, there's no hard documentation on why. There's lots of theories why. There's also another theory that there was a Cherokee writing system before this, and some of what he came up with is model on that too. But essentially, you know, what happened is he served in the military for a while.
Okay.
And he'd seen this idea that, you know, people could write back and forth, and he wanted to do the same thing. But it was more a matter of, I guess, like cultural pride to have our own. Yeah, and so he started working on this unique system of writing that was specifically Cherokee. And so he called it talking leaves. That was his terminology for it, because he's seen people sending papers like, hey, they know what's happening way over there, you know, when they're not together. And so when he started developing the writing system, we actually have another presentation we did about this. I wish we had it with us, but you know, how it turned out that it looked like some of the characters do look like English, but they don't sound like English. There's a conjecture that he was influenced by other languages like Cyrillic and Greek, and I forget what else now, but there's several others that we have a comparison slides you can see. Okay. But like I said, there's no real hard documentation of why he did it. You know, it's just kind of, that's how it turned out, but the people kind of assume that, you know, he wanted to be something that was specifically Cherokee rather than China.
Yeah, one of the issues too is early on, there were certain missionaries that said that we shouldn't have our own writing system after it was already adopted within a few years. It was a pretty decent writing system because almost 90% could read and write in a few years of the creation.
Okay.
But after they started writing, there was missionaries that came in and they were like, you just need to do it in English phonetics. That way there's a better bond between whites and Indians, because we'll know we'll get closer to knowing what you understand if we can have a little bit.
And it would have saved you the Unicode problems.
Yeah, which we never foresaw a couple hundred years ago. But you know, the advantage is some tribes haven't adopted the language as quickly. Mm-hmm. But when we first got our phones out, it was really exciting this last year. And even once in a while, we'll run into somebody that didn't know, and we'll run into some really older people in communities that are way in the backwoods, and we'll show them the language on a phone. And almost inevitably, these older people do this. Can you believe we're on something that's on a commercial? I mean, imagine your language isn't supported anywhere. And for the entire time of you growing up, they did everything that you've known, subversive to blatant annihilation of a culture and language. And you're included on something. How did that happen? And our cultural pride in our writing system has been, within the last few days now, or last couple hundred years, Cherokees really want to see their writing system. In fact, phonetics has never really caught on. In fact, we were talking at a computer company way up north, and one of the people were like, why don't you just give up your language and write in phonetics? It's a valid thing, but we can't get the communities to support that. We never, you know, even some of our programs, our language programs, tried. And they could get people like us to use it because we already understand English well enough of writing systems to do that. But we can't get the older generation involved with us. And if you don't get the older generation, you don't get the prayers, you don't get the cultural understanding, you don't get the old documents that we have. And so when Sequoia adopted this, and you know, there's lots of speculation. A lot of times people basically try to say you know, how could he have done this? I mean, for one, he was actually not literate in English. So you can imagine, and you know, we always argue because, God, it'd be so much nicer too to have an alphabet. You know, syllabary is pretty tough sometimes because we have drops of some vowels, and an alphabet's very powerful. But this is a guy that he adopted it. It's what we have. And he actually came up with the cursive writing. And so the cursive writing is very different than what you see today. But even he adopted it. He worked with the printing press and some of the missionaries to actually change it over to which looks like some English characters because it was more affordable. because you don't have to, if someone's already got a bunch of D's, you can use those as some of your characters that look like the cursive writing that you already developed. And so.
Now, my second question is, are you in contact with people working on other, I don't know what the right term I'm looking for is, minority languages, languages like Welsh or Irish or other endangered languages?
Yeah, we do a lot of outreach, and so far we've had a lot of success because one of the biggest problems with cultures dying is expansion of it. People usually focus in on just the language, and one of the biggest problems is that it's not just about the language. It's not that you could just search in the language, that, oh, great, we can search in it. It's that you're actively using your language every day in a way that you would have naturally used anyway. And so we've had people come from Ireland. The guy that did the Language Geek, he does Welsh. And he's Welsh, yeah. He's the one that he actually, we didn't have any ability to do Unicode on PCs until he came around.
Okay.
And Cherokee Nation sponsors PCs pretty heavily. And if you're dealing with a language, that can be difficult until he came around. And it was wonderful because we've been fighting for digital inclusion of our language for a long time, even among our own community people.
Okay.
So I know that we at Google, for our web search, we sometimes have problems with some languages based on how they're written. If a language doesn't have spaces, we sometimes have a hard time figuring out where, when we're looking at a page, trying to figure out if it matches your keywords, where to split all the characters up into words and do that correctly. It looks like Cherokee is written as a syllabary with spaces in between words. I don't know what kind of grammar rules the language has. I don't know if there are a lot of alternate spellings that we should be able to detect. Or if you type in something, we'll say, oh, well, here's how you would write the plural form, and we'll look for both words for you. Is this tough or easy? Have you worked on that with us?
It's a pretty complex language, but we do have a grammar book and a dictionary that details a lot of the rules that are involved in that. And we have it's a searchable little document that we could actually send to you if you need something like that. And like I said, the good thing about it is, as far as like marking, if like grammar, we follow the same pattern of English and commas and periods and all that. There's no special punctuation, and there's the language is not capitalized or lowercase either. And yeah, but like I said, we have a document that kind of details a lot of these rules of grammar and all that. And like I said, the pluralization is a little bit different for depending on what you're talking about. But yeah, it is an issue.
Okay. Yeah, because it is like when we were doing translations, the biggest thing is people ask is, search. Well, who's searching? You, me, and like it adjusts, and it can adjust kind of heavily depending on if it's talking about you. But in English, sometimes it's actually the same written word, even though it might have a same meaning this way. But you can say the same search for I search, you search, all that stuff. But for us, it's like Turkish, I guess. It's a synthetic language where you add things on the fronts and the backs of words, and those can be, well, for example, there's a lot you can put in a word. One of our translators, his name is Dodiul, and that's it's just like 4 characters, and you drop the vowel usually, but it means the guy over there eating someone else's food. And so there's a lot in each word that you can do, and so we love Cherokee because it can be a lot more advanced than English. And then there's certain things like prepositional stuff that we don't do as well, in the sense that it's already built in the word. So like when we translate, there's a lot of these thes and ins and ons that are very complicated because we don't put those articles in. And so a lot of times when you're doing localization, you have to move things around a little bit. And I'm sure a lot of languages do that, but for us it's new, and making sure that, I know I'm really bad about making sure that I have my little commas and all that stuff proper in there, and so check this code. So I'm like, I messed up the code in the translation. But it's an exciting thing that Google. I mean, you're basically connecting the world together, and you're building a Cherokee world together as well. And having this kind of thing, we can send you the documents, and it can be put in a database where we actually have the dictionary part was done in 75, and it has sentence samples all the way through it for every word and at conjugation. So we have bunches of samples. And since we don't have OCR, poor Jeff had to type this huge document up. And so luckily we call him Cherokee fingers because he's so fast at typing. And so when we can't, we have to get something digitized so that we can be searchable. We always bug Jeff because he's really fast. And if you find any documents, I don't want to say that you'll do it, but it always helps. Anyway, hope that didn't overdo it. But we appreciate it.
I have one comment. I passed around a magazine which has Ray Boney's artwork in it, and I encourage you to take a look at it. Unfortunately, I can't give you the keep because we have only a few copies, but this is an example of this is the story of Sequoia, drawn by these folks. And
if you're on Google, look up Roy Boney and Native American Times, isn't it? Or Indian Country Today, and this thing, it has actually got the whole, it's like a digital version of our history that we talk today, but it's in graphic novel form.
And you may see the posters that I made from the first page of that. I had one question. Since you have almost 200 years of written parallel text, English and Cherokee, what would you like to do with that, with the Cherokee Phoenix, to further, well, you have a tremendous resource there. What do you want to do with it?
Well, for one, I mean, we have a lot of documents that we don't have digitized, and typing them up takes a long time. And unfortunately, we're a small group, like digital group, you know, so we're dealing with a lot of other issues. So, but what we'd like to do is be able to take that documents and put these translations that, you know, a lot of times what we did is we did the English versions and Cherokee versions, you know, and all these documents, all these newspapers, so that people could read it. Because I don't know if we mentioned it, but the Cherokee Phoenix was the most popular American newspaper of its time in Europe. We had more subscriptions than any other newspaper in Europe that came from the Americas. So our newspaper was known. In fact, they would do a lot of correspondence. So Cherokees actually knew about Turkish cannons in the 1800s that would take down a British ship with one shot. They knew about the British mining rubber. And so it was the CNN of the day of what was going on. And we have all this materials that have really old words that, you know, just like if you read 1800s English writing, there are some fantastic things you can learn about grammar. But unfortunately, we have lots of museums and archives of stuff that we hadn't had time to type up everything. And so we have to hurry because, you know, our papers are getting old and not everything's digitized.
Yeah, the Cherokee Phoenix itself, I think the University of Georgia has a digital archive of it, but it's just images. And so there's the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. They have a website that has images of it too, but there's no like true text version of it anywhere. And if we could get that, that'd be like a really excellent resource. And beyond that, we do have a lot of like some of the books that we showed in the presentation. We have these old song books and hymn books, story books. We have old primers, all this stuff we could have it digitized like with actual text instead of just scanned images. That'd be like really excellent. So we could have it searchable and all that stuff. That would be like Google Translate or something. All this stuff would be really great to have all this, but. And the issue is, you know, there's not a lot of people that we have. The three of us, we're the entire Cherokee language technology team at Cherokee Nation, and so we do a lot of other things. But if we had some way to actually, like someone mentioned OCR, that would be like a really great tool that we could use too to digitize all this.
Because you know where we're from, it's not a tech community. We're a low internet area with speakers that want to be more involved, but we. You know, trying to get very good speakers online, just tapping up the stuff is pretty tough.
Most people can either on their phone.
Yeah, and imagine doing it on a phone, because that's your major device with like internet and stuff. And PCs, we're still hoping to get some better support, but it's kind of tricky. If an update wipes out, you know, we'll go install Cherokee on it. One update wipes it out, we got to go back. They're like, well, it's broke. And what it is the computer was updated and we have to put Cherokee back on it and all of that stuff. And so we're always very excited. That keyboard alone has been really handy on this front. we know people that actually, when things happen like that, they type a lot of stuff up in that browser there, and then they can copy and paste it and do something else with it. So people really work hard at trying to use the language, and even something as simple as a little keyboard on a search engine site has become useful.
Just a quick question about the keyboard. So you said someone had developed a sort of phonetic composing keyboard instead, right? But the one we have is your traditional keyboard with the shifts and stuff, is that right? So is there a spec for the composing keyboard? Would you rather see that keyboard as an option instead of the one that's there now?
That would be great if we had that. We have that chart to see earlier in the presentation. I find it here. This follows the phonetic conventions that we use. I don't see it anywhere. Let's just scroll through it real quick. I know we had it.
It's on the Google part, so that'd be down here.
There it is. This chart here, you can see it has the Cherokee on the left, and on the right is the English phonetic equivalent. So you would type that letter combination out to get that syllable, and that's the.
So that maps directly onto an English keyboard.
Yeah.
Sort of lowercase.
Yeah.
And for people under 40, we like the phonetics because we already know the keys very fast.
Yeah, right.
But some of the elders really like the old way.
Older thing, yeah.
And so we always defer to them sometimes.
Because,
right.
They're the source of your culture, right? So.
But when it comes to us typing, we type the phonetics because it's so fast. And there's certain characters. There's like 10 of them that you barely use. Of course, like any word, if you need that letter, you need that letter. And so sometimes when you're typing that way, those 10 that you barely use are really hard to find on the keyboard.
Yeah.
When you haven't typed it in like a day and a half.
Right. You forget just which.
You look at the chart and there. But.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, we need to respect the time, but thank you all for joining us today. If any of you would like to ask further questions, we're going to be having lunch in Charlie's, and we'd be happy to have you join us. Thank you so much to our speakers, and just to let you know, they're speaking at the Unicode conference in the next couple of days here in Santa Clara, and we are happy that they could join us at Google as well.
Yeah, Wednesday at 3, we're talking over there, a little bit different, more Unicode based to try to, we also get to meet the guy that helped us get into the Unicode chart, which we were very excited about because he's, when your language is actually adopted into Unicode, I know we're geeks too, like that's really cool. Like we're going to meet that guy. So we're excited, come by if you can. I know you guys are busy and we appreciate you taking the time out you guys are changing the world one code string at a time. And people notice out there. We do. So thanks for letting us search and iced tea.